Okay, welcome to this podcast. So I've got Justin L. Shaw, who is a mystical comedian. I love the sound of that already. Doctor of divinity and a sorcerer, passionate about empowering people to reclaim their self-worth and to manifest their highest potential. And I think that's an amazing way to start your kind of bio, Justin, really. So, did you want to
Yes.
just give us a quick kind of intro from your bio perspective, really, as to how that kind of came about and what that really means? Because it sounds pretty fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, I make up all kinds of terms for myself. It's kind of fun, like it's a mystical comedian, hope dealer. There's what do you call it? I can't think of it right now. But yeah, I like to make names up for myself, because it sounds cool because there's just really nothing like what I'm doing. I mean, there's some people that there's some comedians that are pretty deep, and there are some spiritual people that are pretty funny, but there's not really a good combination of a true combination of both. Like I kind of want the book is mystical comedy. It's going to make people laugh, think, and feel, and in those three things is growth. So I wrote the book in hopes for Generation TikTok to kind of get it. So I realized I had to keep them intrigued. So every moment I was thinking about laugh, think, feel throughout the whole book. So for people that read, it's a fun and fast read. But even for some people, like, reading is just not something a lot of people do anymore. But yeah, that's it's. I mean, it all started, I mean, the beginning is, like starting kind of from my childhood and stuff. I don't know like how back you want to go or anything, but
Yeah, we can cover that. I think, do you just want to introduce the book to start with? Because that was the kind of reason that
yeah.
we kind of connected effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is called Sorcery 101. It's a little bit different than what you might be thinking. The term sorcery. So sorcery is spelled S-O-R, and I spell it S-O-U-R. So I use the word source, which is source energy is what we all came from, what we're all going back to. It is that etheric field, the unified field. God, it's just there's a million names for it. But source energy is the one I like to use the most. And so I came up with the term sorcery and kind of separated it a little bit from wizards and magic because this is real magic. This is not disputed scientifically. Like, this is real. Anyone can do this. This is real magic. So yeah, it's and then there's so it's called Sorcery 101, 13 rungs to a higher elevation of consciousness. So there's kind of a system I created to help heal trauma. And so it's kind of it's a guide to becoming a sorcerer, essentially. And in becoming a sorcerer, there's a lot of healing and focus and direction for your life, and there's all kinds of stuff that can come of it. But that's kind of the basis of the book.
And that kind of, thank you for that, Justin. And that's kind of based on your own experience, isn't it? Obviously, you've been through well, we've all been through a challenging life, probably by the time we get to our ages, effectively. But your life has obviously been quite challenging, and you've obviously had, connections to PTSD and substance abuse and those sorts of things, which are normal conversations for most people. Most people, as they go through their sort of life path or spiritual path, find themselves being challenged in different ways, and then all of us turn to different ways to find that kind of inner help, I guess, in any way that we can. So do you just want to kind of cover that in a snapshot, really? Your kind of how you found yourself where you are now, really?
Yeah, see, I have it down pretty tight few minutes now. I've done this a few times. So yeah, it's important to kind of I like people knowing that I have empathy for them and not just sympathy. Sympathy is listening to the pain, empathy is feeling it with them. So I like people to know I have empathy, and without everything I've been through, I wouldn't have developed this kind of empathy. So that's the kind of stuff that you look back on and it's like, oh, okay, there's a purpose for this. It sure didn't seem like when I was in it, but now I'm seeing it. So, mine started very young. I've had all kinds of things happen, but it can be traced back to just a childhood that was just emotionally neglectful. Not neglectful in any sort of physical way. We had plenty of food and all the clothes, and I had toys and nothing like that. We were kind of middle class, maybe upper middle class. So we had things that we needed, but what was lacking was any sort of emotion in the house. So it was just me and my mom growing up. My parents were much older when they had me. They were both 42. They had already had four kids who were 19 years older than me. So I came along much, much later. 19 years is the closest sibling to me. So they were all out of the house and moved. So I'm an only child and I have brothers and sisters. So it's like it's both. Because I do have brothers and sisters, but they're more like aunts and uncles. So it's just me and my mom growing up. And you know that my dad left, and that they had a just a tough marriage at the time. And you know, when I came in, it seems like that you know there was a crack in the marriage that you know shifted into a canyon that was not overcomable. And so when I was very young, they separated. So it was just me and my mom, and she just really struggled with emotions. She just couldn't say the word love, and you know she wasn't a hugger, and she really couldn't express love in any sort of way. And that was growing up. That was really strange. Is I had this strange relationship with the word love. I couldn't say it. It sounded weird. It sounded awkward. And it was a very strange relationship I had with this word growing up because I never heard it. So that's not healthy. You know that I God bless my mom. She's passed on, and but you know she was a very kind person. Her kind of trauma was always internalized, so she was never angry or you know like being mean. She internalized all her pain and just would shut down, and she'd go into her rooms and just kind of close the door. And so I mean growing up it was you know me in my room and my mom in her room, and that's where we spent all our time. We never we came together, you know, maybe for dinner or something, and then we'd go back. So that was that right there. Obviously, starts things, and you know, I moved into high school, and that's when I kind of discovered the drugs and alcohol thing. You know, before that, it was comedy. Comedy and food were kind of the things that I used uh, to to help process pain and things like that. You know, I found I was pretty good at making people laugh, so that was a good, you know, that took me out of my pain. You know, food was kind of another one. Sports took me out of my pain. But then I found drugs and alcohol in high school, and that was a really easy out because that took really no, and that was an incredible, way more better out. So you know, that led to somehow I got through college and but after college it was the you know I left Arizona State with you know with a degree in communications and a nasty pill habit that was kind of at the peak time of the opiate crisis here in America. And you know they were just throwing out pain pills left and right. They're very easy to get, so I was just heavily addicted to those real bad. And so that you know that's pretty much my 20s is going back and forth on the opiates. And so finally, around 20, I guess it was 27, I decided, okay, you know, I was living in LA at the time. I was trying to do the stand-up comedy thing, which was impossible because I was so screwed up all the time. And so I just was like, okay, you know, let's try this out. So I went to rehab, and you know, I just thought you clean the body out, everything's going to be fine. You know, if you just clean the body out, everything will be fine. And so, you know, that's what I did for 30 days. You know, I cleaned it out, and then I left rehab, and I didn't participate in any of the AA or, you know, just any of, I was like, no, it's, you know, that's not for me, and I'll be fine. It lasted 3 months, which I'm surprised it lasted that long, but obviously without paying respect to the spirit and you know the mind, body, spirit trifecta, there's a recipe for disaster. So yeah, you know 3 months later I'm back out doing the same things. So the second time I go in, now okay, I'm open. What do you got for me? So I went to a faith-based kind of treatment center that you know they preach the things like AA and Christianity and things like that. And so I was open to that because I needed my way didn't work. So I kind of gotten open to that, and they go very well together. You know, AA and Christianity kind of, you know, AA is kind of disguised Christianity, kind of built on the foundation of Christianity, and so they go very well together. And so, you know, that's how it was for about 6 years. You know, unfortunately though, I was living a very mediocre life. Like, but it was better than being on the street. I've been on the streets. I had been in jail. I'd been, you know, halfway houses and rehabs and everything. So it was better than that. The mediocrity was like I can hold a job and have an apartment and have a car, and that was a huge win. So things were just going like that for several years until my mom was pronounced terminally ill. And this is where everything completely shifted in my life. Major thing. This is a big part of the book. And um, so the whole year she was kind of dwindling away. Her body's, her mind is going the dimension. Her body's kind of the cancer is eating away, and that's traumatic enough. But what was much, much worse was this programming I had from all my years in the Christian church that she didn't go to church. She's going to hell. She's because she didn't go to church. So, she didn't talk about Jesus. She just didn't identify as a Christian. Therefore, I was taught she's going to be eternally damned. And, that whole thing, that idea really screwed me up. I mean, so not only is Christianity not there in my time of need, it actually made things worse. So, that idea was stuck with me the whole time she was passing away, and it was just horrible. I mean, of course, so and I go right back to drugs and alcohol because like this is too much for me to handle because a pastor isn't able to tell me anything that I need to hear. He would say things that, he wouldn't say she's going to hell, but she wouldn't say he wasn't. She wasn't.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like that's you're of no help. You're just making things worse right now. So, it's that whole thing just finally after she passed is when I really started questioning things. Is my mother really, eternally damned and all that stuff? And I started thinking about it. And I started questioning my beliefs. I replaced my pastor with a shaman, and I ditched my doctor with the pills and medications, and those can be fine for some people, but they just weren't working for me. And so I started meditating and I started doing things like that and started opening myself up to this world, living in the Christian world. This is the best analogy I can come up with. Living in the Christian world is like a big metaphorical mansion, right? So in this mansion, there's like 17 bedrooms and plenty of bathrooms, and there's a pool room, and there's a spa, and there's a bowling alley and a movie theater, and life is great in the mansion. When I first got in Christianity, this is great. But as time moves on, you realize you're not allowed to leave the mansion. So leaving the mansion metaphorically is kind of, investigating other religions. Even things like yoga and meditation are kind of taboo in the Christian world. So, so you find out that this is a beautiful mansion, but you're stuck. It is now a prison. And then I realized that this mansion is not only a prison, but it's built on a cracked foundation of fear, judgment, and control. And so the mansion crumbled around me when my mother died, just crumbled. I couldn't leave the mansion, it just crumbled. So I had to leave. And I realized life is much better outside the mansion because there's a lot more freedom. So that's what I did. And so this is around the time when I had my bliss attack. And so I love talking about this because it's just fascinating. I I was meditating at the time. I was, you know, questioning things. I was getting rid of false beliefs, both from childhood and from adulthood. Christianity came in adulthood. And so I was questioning these things and meditating and stuff. And one day I had this, I can only explain it as it's like 3 hours of waves of love. It's like it's a bliss attack. It's it's if you place panic with love, that's what happened. So I had a panic attack, but it was if you replace it with love, and I had this for 3 hours, and it was just this amazing all these. I wasn't it wasn't an out of body experience. I was very much on my bed in my body. I wasn't surrounded by loved ones or anything. Like the near death, the classic near death experience. I like to call this my near life experience because it was like I was on the other side emotionally. I was not on the other side like physically or my spirit or anything like that. I was emotionally dead, like crossed over. And so this feeling of true bliss was just absolutely incredible. And at the same time, I'm getting downloads for my future, for like truths about the universe and reality. And I know they're truths because of how I'm feeling in the moment. Like you can't, like there's no replacing this. So I knew these were truths. And I realized I had been on airplane mode my whole life. Like my whole life I was airplane mode. You put it on your phone, a phone without, with on airplane mode is still useful, but it's not living up to its potential. You can't get the texts and the calls and all the messages. That's airplane mode. So I was on airplane mode. And so and when I connected to this field, so it's the unified field, the quantum field, like this field of its source energy, I realized it was like, fish with water. It's like explaining water to a fish. A fish just isn't going to understand the concept of water, is it? It's like, what are you talking about? Like a fish is not going to understand water. It's the same with us. And so, it was just, and once you see the water, once you're the fish that sees the water, all you want to do is go swimming around and tell other fish about the water, which most, they're not gonna, a couple of them might pop up and be like, oh, let me interested, but most of them will be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so that's what I've been doing the past couple of years is I'm this fish that is now swimming around trying to tell other fish about the water.
Right. So that kind of awakening moment. So what do you think kind of created that? Was that just the mental state you were in? Were you doing meditation or what do you think was the kind of activator for you for that kind of thing to happen for those 3 hours?
So the book is a map for other people to have their own bliss attack. It
That's
is
what I was going to ask.
it's a step-by-step map that I came up with that, well, I mean, it's a co-creation, right? Like is any thought really original? I don't know, but that's it's a step-by-step process. And these are the things that I did to have this experience. And it's so funny, this was considered, what most people consider to be a religious experience. This incredible, like at one amazing moment, right? Well, what was standing in the way of my religious experience was my religion, paradoxically. So, and that's part of it is there's the religions, they have so many amazing things and so many amazing teachings, and you can keep all that, but where the problem comes in is when they start poking you with the fear and the control. And you need to be this way to be a Muslim. You need to be this way to be a Christian. You can't do that. You can't do this. No, you can't do that. You know, uh, just all that is just garbage and lies, all of it. And so if you keep all the best parts about religion and dump all the dogma, well, now you're spiritual. And there's a big difference between religion and spiritual. So, religion divides, spirituality unites. Religion is taught, spirituality is found. So they're very different. People use them interchangeably, but they're very, very different. I consider myself spiritual and not religious in any way. People hear not religious and they think you're an atheist or a Satan lover or something. Like it's just like, oh, you're not religious. You must be one of these other things. And like, no, 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 and it's not how it works. So yeah, that's yeah, I forget where I was going with that, but yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think you've kind of hit on one of the key points really. Because again, in most people's lives, we're all kind of brought up in society, and we have overlays from our parents, from the people that are well peer groups, people that we live around, and then of course we do have religions and other things that kind of encapsulate on the top, and that kind of locks us down into these low frequency grids, is the way that I tend to see things. And I think until you've had an experience, generally a bad one for most people, that kind of brings in this trauma that you go through. And as part of the kind of development path to work through the trauma, you then start to look different places, generally find different things. And I think that's when most people find spirituality. They start to realize that there are these other people around the world that are spiritual, that don't align to a particular kind of set of rules, basically. But again, like you said, it's a very personal path. We all walk our own path, we all have our own experiences, but you kind of realize that if you actually overlay the techniques that you can incorporate into your life, you start to change. And I think that was when I read your kind of your bio and some of your details. That was what kind of thought I thought that'd be a really interesting conversation with Justin, because obviously he's been through this whole process and obviously written a book, but interestingly written a book for other people going through the same thing. And there's lots of self-help books and there's lots of self-development books that we all know and love. But I think it's more interesting when you actually read or you're taught by someone who's been there themselves. And that I think is the big differentiator between the self-help world and this type of conversation, whereby you're talking to people that have been through the experience, popped out the other end, and then are kind of very well placed to signpost other people, really.
Yeah, yeah, no, it is because I mean that's my credentials. A lot of these kind of books, I mean, a doctor wouldn't write anything near this, because I just I'm myself in it. I'm funny. There's a lot of pop culture. There's technology metaphors. There's all kinds of stuff that I use to speak. So Jesus spoke the language of the times, and the language of these times is, technology metaphors and pop culture parables and humor. So that's what I speak through to speak to the youth. So certainly, that wouldn't be something that a doctor would do. But most of these books are, that a lot of the self-help, they're written by their doctors, and maybe they've been through their stuff, maybe they haven't, but they certainly don't talk about it in the book, and so you have no idea. Like they're just doing it. It's just kind of the usual kind of self-help, which is all very good, but like I have something very different. I've been through this. I'm on the other side, and I've just come up with something that's just more entertaining than any other self book health book I've ever read. Like if you gave this to me at 20, I would be, like this would help me soar, like
Because that is
so
that's the whole
yeah.
thing, Justin. I think, isn't it? When we pick up the traditional, as you said, doctor-written self-help books, you're in a place of pain or trauma, you want help. You go and buy a book, you start to read it, and you throw it on the floor and think, just it's just rubbish. Generally, it just doesn't do what it says on the tin, or it's too difficult to follow, or it's just written by someone that hasn't had the experience. Because in your book, you talk about emotional alchemy, which I quite like the word. Really, it sounds quite cool. So, what is kind of emotional alchemy from your perspective? And I guess, how do we sort of transform emotions rather than suppress them? Because that's what you're kind of talking about, really.
Yeah, I mean, first law of thermodynamics, energy cannot be created or destroyed, it can only be transformed. And so that's where emotional alchemy comes in. You're transforming the energy that's already there. Instead of getting rid of it, you're transforming it into something greater. So there's ways to do it. And I put in the book, like there's certain ways, you know, like fear, let's say, can be alchemized. Alchemy is the ancient tradition of turning lead into gold. Scientists have their doubts at this, but science can be kind of boring sometimes. So, but emotional alchemy is very doable, and it is very real. So, something like fear can be alchemized into fascination. So if you kind of get fascinated of why, if you start digging and diving and why am I fearing this? Why do I fear this person? Why do I fear this situation? If you start becoming fascinated with it, it transforms that energy. There's several in there I can't think of offhand, but there's several examples of here's an emotion, here's the alchemized emotion, and a lot of it comes from just the basic emotions of just that fear and hate and things like that, and those can easily be alchemized just through the act of forgiveness many times, and so many people I see every day that are harboring old old wounds, and that it's very very dangerous because if you're harboring an old wound, it makes you very volatile, and so the whole road rage thing is a great example. No one's really that pissed off at someone flipping the bird. No one is. What they're pissed off at is that triggers the fact that they're still angry at their father for leaving, and now they've come up with an outlet for that anger. That person has now become their father, and they get the brunt of the insanity. And that's you see it a lot, with the whole Karen thing, which I feel very bad for any woman that's actually named Karen. I'm really That's really a shame. I'm sorry, ladies. But that's yeah, it's that whole thing of and these people are getting caught at their worst moment. I just feel horrible for them. Like people want to be like, oh, what a bad person, what a jerk. I know that there's two sides to everything, and there's the shadow side of us, and there's the divine shadow and the divine side of us. I like to say I'm a little bit Deepak and a little bit Tupac, you know. So that's the kind of that fits me perfectly. It's those two sides, and everyone has those two sides. And you know, people that are getting caught in these instances only, or you're only seeing their shadow. You're not seeing anything about the good. So I feel very bad for them. But that's what's happening is they're erupting and having these way overdrawn for nothing. And I used to think, I was like, what's wrong with these people? Why are they? Who cares? But now I know, you know, like that's just directed anger from old wounds. It's got nothing to do with that. So that emotional alchemy is very important, and forgiveness is just so critical. It's just so critical. You know, have you forgiven? I've forgiven all the, I know for a fact I've forgiven people in my life, which has been very, very difficult. I had you know, all sorts of stuff happen that you know, someone should say you shouldn't be forgiving, but you know, forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean you work toxic people back into your life. That's not what that means. That just means you let go and you let go of that energy. But it's just extremely important to let go of these things so that you know we don't have Karen moments. So that is emotional alchemy, turning these base emotions into elevated emotions through acts like forgiveness, you know, like and kindness. Kindness is a big one. You know, just you can really turn things around very quickly if you start getting these concepts. Things can really start changing fast.
Because I think that's the thing, really. The way that I kind of see that is everything is vibrational frequency. So when we look at someone in, it's angry, it's enraged, negativity, someone playing computer games that are really angry, they're low frequency, they're vibrating at a very low frequency space. And of course, that means that will attract more low frequency into their space, into life. So, of course, as you said, this is what happens with the road rage type things. That if you're vibrating at a low frequency already, someone pulls out in front of you, they're not doing it on purpose. They don't even know who you are. They're just made a mistake generally. But if you go into that kind of anger state and rage state and start to do the whole kind of road rage thing, it's your vibratory frequency that's the problem because that's where you're vibrating at effectively. And like you said, when you look at things that have been done to you that are bad, forgiveness is changing frequency. As you forgive people, you kind of like nullify that energy and just allow your frequency to rise. And then you move into a different band. And of course, things don't trigger you quite the same. And that's what I think is one of the great spiritual teachings, really, is learning to change these frequency bands by working through your traumas, your triggers, your problems. And then, of course, you become a better person. So, in theory, if you were kind of well if you kind of well-rounded and you're vibrating at a high frequency, no one should be able to trigger you at all. Because in theory, you shouldn't have any triggers. So you should be able to say anything to that person, or someone could say anything to you, and it just wouldn't trigger you because there is no red button to find because they've all been cleared, and you're obviously vibrating at a different frequency. But of course, that takes understanding, time, patience, and years to learn, obviously, which is the key thing. So
Yeah, yeah.
is that your opinion?
Yeah, it's absolutely. And I like to say, you know, it's respond over react. You know, the shadow is the reactor, the sorcerer is the responder. And where you want to get to is the responder. Because if you're just constantly reacting, you're not in you can't think. You know, like if we're constantly reacting, we're not using the right uh we can't think because we're in a fight or flight, and you know you can only think about you know fight, run, or hide. It's really all you can think about. You can't think about anything else when you're in fight or flight. So reacting is what we want to get away from, and we have a society full of reactors. They're everywhere. There's that, yeah, and they don't even realize like what's going on because they're not consciously aware. So you know it's if you do not if you're not constantly questioning your thoughts and feelings before they become actions, you have now been relegated to an organic robot. And that's what we see in society is just people not questioning things and not aware. So they're just running a program. Everyone's programmed. You can't have a computer without a program. It's a paperweight. So everyone's programmed for something. And so, you know, that's so you're just running a program. And for me, it was a fault. It was a virus. It was a faulty program, and it was I was programmed for failure, programmed for destruction. So you can overcome that, but you have to be first aware that you're programmed for destruction. So, it's so there's a lot of people out there that are not that don't question things. And so they're just these robots, and they're just, the RPC, the role-playing characters. And yeah, there's a lot of them. And I don't know what percentage of society, but it's the majority. Is that number 51%? Is it 80%? I don't know, but it's definitely the majority of society are these kind of RPC people who are just simply not aware of themselves. So the whole sorcery thing is to try to wake people up and to get people like, hey, like you can take control of your life. It is not it is free will. It is destiny for some people. It is free will and destiny. It's free will for me and for you and for many others. But for someone who's locked into the programming, it's going to be destiny because they have no choice in the matter. They might consciously think they have a choice and they want a choice, but the truth is that they don't, and they're just going to run their program, and so destiny is in their fate. But you can wake up and start questioning things and get back to free will.
This is kind of what you're describing. It's kind of the Matrix, isn't it? The red pill, blue pill moment, really, where you can kind of take, the red pill, you can see the reality as it kind of is, or you can kind of go back to sleep and effectively follow the program. And that's why I think, for me, the Matrix was kind of one of these films that came out that I just, as soon as I watched it, I thought this is real life. This is like a documentary. And of course, all of the people I was, in peer groups with said, no, it's a film. I said, no, it's like a documentary. This is exactly what's happening in society. But
Hmm.
again, most people can't seem to see that still. And you have to wonder whether the programming system and the grid and the frequency is so low that it's just keeping people down at that in that fear-based, I don't have enough money to pay the bills or pay the car or, just buy another beer. They're all just in this kind of live for today, can I afford to exist until tomorrow type mode. But when you
Hmm.
kind of take the blinkers off and look outside and think, in the world, there's vast amounts of everything, energy, money, you know, billionaires, millionaires, there's money everywhere. Because most people are locked into this space that they don't actually manifest any money to be able to pay for anything because they're living on this fear-based sort of program, really. Is that what you would agree with?
Oh yeah. Oh sure. Yeah. No, that's absolute fact. And um, it's fascinating how this whole thing is set up because it is a simulation. It is definitely a simulation. That's the best term I have for it. Now, something like the Matrix is like, yeah, I mean, yes, there is part of the Matrix that's absolutely truth, but the other side of the Matrix is not, AI, using us as batteries or things like that. That's scary. It's not the case. The other side of the simulation is beautiful, blissful, amazing. But it if you think about a simulation, so like a flight simulator, you get in the flight simulator, you learn how to fly a plane before actually getting into a real plane in the quote real world and flying a plane. So, there's a purpose for simulations. And so the purpose of this simulation is to get better at love. Because love is the one thing that transcends space and time, and we will both leave it here and take it with us. So it is the one that is what we're supposed to be practicing and getting better at. It's the only thing that matters. It's the only thing that matters. Getting better at love, because it's we're gonna both leave it here and take it with us. And so there's a clear purpose for this simulation, and it's very interesting. But it is you see these people wake up and like it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see people wake up and kind of live their truth, and it's really interesting to see how similar it is to the simulation. I mean, I see more things, and the synchronicities are get kind of crazy, and the whole thought and it just gets so deep. But there is no question that it is a simulation, and it is like the Matrix, a little bit different in terms of on the other side, but it's really fascinating, and you can change it at any point, at any time. Like you just have to change your energy and start. That's how it calls it in because you've decided to become someone else, and every morning I would sit and meditate of the person who I want to be, and in that, my body is memorizing that person who I want to be. And so that's what's going on internally. Externally, the universe is now conspiring to make things happen, to make that happen as well. So, I'm still not at the end game, of course, but it's amazing to see this book and how, people responding to it, and the possibility of it. It's only been out about a year, and I'm hoping for big things for it, but I knew these things take a long time. It could, I was thinking 5 years, so I'm not even a year in. So, but this is what can happen is this incredible idea just coming out of when you get out of the fight or flight, when you get out of the programming, you're reacting mode. If you're always in reacting mode, if you're having um, your concentration is on something worldly at all times. Yeah, they call it converged. Yeah, you have a converged attention and then a divergent attention. So divergent is kind of a focus. Converged is what we're in right now. And it's what most people are in all day. But if you're constantly in a converged focus attention, what you're telling the creator of the universe is that you're busy. And sometimes we are busy, and that's fine. But if you're constantly busy, it can't talk to you. So that's where meditation comes in. You're creating this divergent focus and breaking it. That's breaking out of the simulation. That is taking the red pill for me. Is meditation. That is the red pill.
So if someone's struggling, now, basically, what would you say, going on your experience on your book, what can they do today, really? Kind of simple tasks, and what sort of daily practice should they do to start shifting their energy, really?
Yeah, well, if people can afford the book, I would gladly send people a PDF, in my email. It's sorcerer13 at Gmail with a U. But that's a great place to start. But just a few things out of the book that I can go over real quick is, meditation. That's huge. So that's probably the biggest thing. The shadow work is technically the first rung meditation, but meditation, they have all these guided meditations on Insight Timer and Headspace and Calm. Great. YouTube has a lot of good ones. A lot of people are just like, oh, meditation, I can't just sit there and be silent. Well, you don't have to. There's lots of guide. I started with guided, and so that's a really good place to start is all these guided meditations. So just kind of starting with that and just committing, like I say twice a day because I think, you need one in the morning, one in the evening. But it's a bit like taking a shower, like we wash off the previous day's dirt and grime and grossness every day. So meditation is like showering your mind. It's like pulling the weeds of your mind. Like, let's get all that out of there so we can get the good gardening and, plant some stuff. So that's what meditation is. So it is, I do usually an hour a day, with like half an hour, half an hour. I do two half an hour. But sometimes, I can only get in, 10-minute one, 15, even five. You can go to your car on a lunch break and get in a 5-minute meditation. You can do it anywhere, anytime. And with your phones now, it's just put in your earphones and boom, done. So meditation is the biggest thing people can do to start healing themselves. Another would be just to understand the concept of the shadow, what we were talking about earlier, the reactor and the responder, the shadow and the divine. The shadow is a side of us that, we don't, you know, it was created in a time of need, but like for me, I no longer need it, but I understand what it is. And there are points in my life, I like to put the shadow in a car metaphor. So the shadow can be driving your car, it can be in the passenger seat, or it can be in the back seat, which is where you want it. When the shadow is driving my car, every time the shadow is driving the car, it's going to aim for the cliff. Every time. Every time it's going to aim for the cliff. And it's going to fall off the cliff, and then it's going to be taken up, and then it's going to go right back off the cliff. That is what happens when the shadow is in the driver's seat. And that was me in my 20s. And that was just a dumpster fire, just a complete dumpster fire. So, but the shadow can also be in the passenger seat. So this is what happened when I did the Christian world. So this is still too involved in the conversation. It's right. Your passenger, it's not in the back seat. Your passenger is very involved in everything going on, and that's what was with me. I had this Christian fear thing, the shame and the guilt, and I'm not good enough, and I don't fit in, and I'm not really. I don't feel like I'm Christian. I don't, they like they just don't. It doesn't seem like they care about it. Like, so all that chatter, the fear chatter, all that stuff, that's sitting in the passenger seat. So that's too involved in your life. So where it is now is in the back seat because you can't throw it out of the car. So it in the back seat is like where you're checking on kids, just checking on it. Like, how you doing back there? Good. Need any Cheerios or how's the air temperature? You know, like so, and that's because you have to love your shadow. Because if you start hating that side of you, now you're creating emotions that are exactly that match the shadow itself. So you're hating hate, and it's just like hating evil just creates more of it. So it's very important that we don't hate this side of us and we start to love because that's the step to healing. And I like to tell people in terms of the shadow, name it because it's not you. Who you are is the awareness of the shadow. So one of the big gripes I have against Alcoholics Anonymous is this: I am an alcoholic. No, no one is. None of you are. You are the awareness of the alcoholic. You cannot, everything that you are, it should never be reduced to your worst trait. Like I am, what? So, so I just have some issues with that. But so you are the shadow. You are the awareness of the shadow. So I say to name it. And the best person I can I can come up with that's named is Eminem, and he has a very healthy relationship with his shadow. He's named his shadow. This is Slim Shady. This has nothing to do with me. I'm Marshall. This is Slim, and he raps in the shadow. He all the things he says that are just absolutely ridiculous and bonkers. It's just the shadow talking. And so he has this extremely healthy relationship with his shadow and that was created, of course, from growing up in horrible situations and terrible situations. So he has quite a shadow, but he deals with it in a really cool way. So, and we are not all of us are rappers. That's not that we don't rap. That's not the way I deal with my shadow. I like to kind of go to the gym and get some anger out, and there's different ways of doing it. But he has a really but name it and start coming up with better ways to deal with it. And those are the two biggest things I'd say out of the book. That start there.
Mm. That's a really good way to. So, in your kind of view, is the shadow the same as ego? Obviously, we talk about ego as well. Ego being that same thing, that kind of character that is the part that's continually talking, continually trying to drive you to do negative things, but is not really the part of you. It wants to be in control, but it's not the good part, effectively. It's the bit that needs to be in the back seat again, really, and kind of put to bed. So, therefore, that, as you said, the conscious awareness is connected to source is the part of you that's running the day-to-day kind of session, effectively your life, and that egotistical or shadow part is kept out of the way in the background. Would that be the same idea from your perspective?
I think it's very similar. I think I think they bleed together certainly a lot. I do think they are separate things, but I think a lot gets bled together a lot. Um, but I do think they're still separate things. This egotism and then the shadow. I think they're separate things, but they're very very similar, and so many things go together with the two of them. But I like to say ego it stands ego it stands for edging God out, right? Like it's just it's like I got this, like it's it's just this again. It's a side of us that we have to embrace because if we start hating it, then that's not good. But yeah, the egotism and yeah, the shadow are very similar. They bleed together, but still are different things. Yeah.
So where are you, Justin, on the whole kind of concept of other energies? So obviously the experiences that you had, PTSD, addiction, those sort of things, lots of probably low vibration, lots of negative things going on in your life. Did you kind of feel that you were being kind of not attacked by, but certainly focused on by negative things that you couldn't see, other energies? Is that part of your kind of understanding?
Yeah, and they're all coming from me. So, and I think there's a lot to that. I think a lot of these negative entities and things, and they're projections of the subconscious. And so yeah, that definitely, and it's hard to do, especially when you're caught in it because you don't understand what's going on. But it's it can be overcome, but there was certainly a lot of it that I had to really overcome to to get here. And it just, yeah, it's it's been a long ride, but it's been a fun one for sure. So, it's pretty interesting to look back on.
I think it's one of those things on my spirit guide channel where it says that when you come to planet Earth, he says always says this is not a holiday destination, basically. When you're in spirit, you don't choose to come here to have a nice life, which is why nobody has a nice life, particularly because this is a working planet, it's a working experience, as you said, it's a spiritual experience, part of your spiritual growth for us as kind of conscious beings in ourselves, but also collectively for our kind of species, really, as kind of humans in that way. So, where do you think, or why do you think, I guess, more people are waking up? There seems to be a big kind of turning on point now, and more people are becoming spiritual, more people are walking away from old kind of programming ideas, religion to probably to a certain degree. So, what's your opinion on that?
I don't know why. I can tell you it's happening though. It's definitely I see more and more of it. I'm why is well, I mean, I guess we're it's time for us to work together. And that's part of religion and politics. These things are not only okay in society, they're encouraged. Pick a side, pick a religion. People don't understand this, what religion like. I'm not religious, it's spiritual, and no one understands that. And the politics are just this giant illusion joke, that makes people think they have a choice, and just angers people. So there's just all this separation, in society, and it's really sad to see because if the unifying, and I think that's why we're waking up, is just the unifying and coming together, and that's the key is because we can't come together. Like the Bible is a great example. Like, everyone just, oh, this will unify everyone. Well, the Bible is segregated into two parts. It's split. So you cannot say that this is this book is going to unify people. It's just, the Jews got the first part and Christians got the second part. So it's it's there's a lot of amazing things, but I think people are seeing, the world is a world of gray, and the Bible is a good example of something that is, full of both divine wisdom and egregious bullshit, and it's both. So so people are starting to realize that and recognize that this is what's happening with me. And it's very cool to see. And I think the purpose is just we have to there's the whole war thing. It's just it's mind-boggling. Like I participate in the world. The way I participate in the world is kind of like, I mean, I see what's going. It's like there's a glass partition between me and the world. So I see what's going on, but I don't let it affect me. And too many people, see what's going on in the world and let it and absorb all that, especially the news and the fear and stuff that they want to project out because that's what, keeps people on the edge of their seats. It's like, okay, more fear, more fear, more fear. And so it's just, it's one of those things. It's I don't know. It's really it's just a very cool thing to see. I mean, it really is just really cool to see people waking up like this, and it is for the purpose of unity. We're not there yet. I don't know if we're gonna see it in my lifetime, but it's cool that it's starting and progressing, and I just keep that glass partition in between me and the world, and things are very good for me.
I think because that's a really interesting way that you framed it as well. Because if you think about it, if you had no media, you wouldn't know there was a war. You'd have no idea. So if you think about like a native tribe in the middle of Africa or somewhere
Yeah,
that don't have the internet, don't have news, they don't know what's happening in any country of the world at all. So they're just
seem to
living
be doing just fine.
life.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah, they're
there's
doing
no
just
like
fine.
there's no low vibration, there's no fear, they're not concerned about, nuclear wars, all the things that we're being kind of pushed with, because all of that is designed to bring the vibration down again to create this low vibrating fear-based space that they seem to want everybody in. But like you say, the glass partition concept is a nice way to think of it because it's very simple and it's actually quite easy to do because if you do watch these things, I do the same. I watch the news just out of interest to see what they're talking about, but it doesn't affect me, doesn't change my emotions. I don't really think about it. I listen to friends and people that get very emotionally engaged in the whole concept. I
Hmm.
just sit quietly in the background and think, doesn't affect me at all, basically, because I'm not going along with it. So, and like you said with politics, the same thing. You always get red and blue. In every country, there's always red and blue. Which one do you want? Well, if you don't want red and you don't want blue, then you choose not to vote, and that is a vote, basically, because you're just saying that I don't like the choices that you give me, red and blue, so I'll choose not to vote at all, which is actually a vote still, effectively.
Mhm. Yeah, and we shouldn't need government. I mean, in my opinion, we shouldn't need it. We do now, but we shouldn't. In the grand scheme of things, the way the government is set up with the police, and we shouldn't need that. If we're all living a heart-centered life, we
Yeah,
shouldn't need to be policed if we're all doing that. Now,
control.
we're not there. We're not even close. But yeah, yeah, it's there, and the news thing is just, I always like to say, I can't change the news, but the news can sure change me. And what I like to tell people in terms of, maybe something that might help is stop watching the news, because when you watch the news, it's given by entertainers. They're entertainers. They're meant to, you know, do that, fear and, like, all the bells and whistles, and, so they're entertainers. So if you get your news from, journalists, well, now it's different. And there's a lot of times when, like, a story can be, they can go on for half an hour as a story in the news, when really, like, a little headline from Apple News, like, everything I need to know about the whole situation is in the headline. I don't even need to open the article. So I would say that that's a big, people get hooked on the news, and I see it all, every time I walk with my dog, and in the mornings, and I see everyone with the news on. It's just they're just completely hooked into it, and just hook, line, and sinker, and you have no idea what you're being fed. So that's I like to make that suggestion to people, like, just if you're trying to, wake up and trying to separate yourself, especially from the news junkies, stop watching it, at least for a while. Like, you need to detox, and because your mind is you've got all this fear going all the time, and so you need it. And that's what's, we get addicted to things we don't like just because they're familiar. So, that's a big. I'm glad we brought up the news, because I like to tell people, like, start reading the news, stop watching it.
But it's like kind of like dopamine effect, isn't it? When you're in that space, it creates dopamine, and that's the whole kind of
Mhm.
clickbait. Same as clickbait in in all these social media platforms. This whole continuing to flick because you're waiting to get something good and nothing's of interest, and you keep going on and you go on and then nothing comes, does it? But you're kind of and then eventually you find a post that you're interested in or something, a reel maybe that you're interested in. You kind of watch it for 2 minutes, you get the dopamine kind of hit and then you're off again. When's the next thing that's going to be interesting? So
Hmm.
from your point of view, Justin, just kind of closing this up then. So where can people find your work and how do people contact you? How do they connect with you? How do they sort of follow you? What's your best platforms really?
Yeah, so, like I said about the email, sorcerer13 at gmail, if you want a copy of the book or to get in contact with me. I was off social media for 4 years, and it was wonderful. I
Yeah.
deleted everything. Like, it was 2020, and everything was horrible with COVID and the politics, and so I just deleted all of it. And so I was off of it for 4 years, and it was just wonderful. It was like a horse wearing blinders. I ran a better race at that time, so, and I truly did. It was really amazing. But there is a lot of good to social media too. Like, now, my algorithms, like, they used to be so negative, and now, I deleted that old account. I started a new one, and now they feed me, like, funny pet tricks, and, like, deep spiritual stuff, and, like, comedy bloopers, and, like, it's just this. And we all have an algorithm up here. So I kind of got off topic of this topic, but that's, like, one thing I wanted. We all have an algorithm, and so what your algorithm is continuing to show you is what you want more of. So, but yeah, I'm on Instagram. It's sorcerer underscore 13 with a U on Instagram. I don't have anything else. I still have Facebook PTSD, so I will not be getting back on that ever. And then, oh, the website is awakenthesorcerer.com with a U. And the book can be on Amazon. There's also the audio of the book is on Audible, and the website as well, which is funny because I read my book and I get to tell my own jokes and stuff. So a lot of people don't have time to read, which is why I I sat in my closet in summer in Arizona, sweating, recording this thing, like, sweating, like, I because you can't get it is so. It's funny story, but yes, there's lots of openings there. So
And how long was that? How long was that audio recording? Was that hours? Like,
3 weeks. It
oh,
was, yeah, it
really?
was pretty much every day for 3 weeks, and it was like 8 hours a day.
Wow.
And because it would, you'd screw up, and then you have to go.
Yeah.
I mean, they do it so that it's as easy as possible, but it still is. You're reading a book and you want it to be the best. So you stumble a line, you redo it. I mean, it's just it's yeah, it's not. It was a great experience overall because it was like, wow, I did it. But yeah, not a lot, especially Arizona. Like my the closet, there's no air conditioning in the closet, so it's just I had to shut my door and just be in there and just drenched in sweat, and I'd have to come out every 45 minutes and just be like, oh,
Wow.
pretty funny. Yeah.
Because that's a massive achievement actually. Because until you do these things, until you try and write books and you try and record things and do some of the media work, you don't realize how difficult it is and how time consuming. Because as you said, when you get the sentence wrong, at some point you've got to come back and obviously clip and cut those edits, and those edits take time to find the mistakes and cut them out and put them back together again. So that's quite a it's quite a lifetime achievement just to be able to do that, really. So
Yeah, yeah, I wrote a book and read it. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So that's that. I'm my life is pretty much made at this
you're
point. So I could
finished.
I could die and be like, hey, I left something. I don't want to do that, but I could at least be like, hey, I did something.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's a lovely way to end it, I think, really. So, I
Yeah.
think, so from my point of view, thanks for coming on, Justin. I've had a laugh and enjoyed your conversation, which has been good. It's nice to cover some of those things quite lightly as well. Obviously, there's some deep dives, but there's also the light touch, which I think is important because different people take different things, and I think sometimes podcasts. I listen to lots of podcasts, and sometimes they're very factual, but they're quite boring and they're not that interesting, really. Whereas I think to try and keep things light and have a bit of a laugh and make fun of yourself as well, if you can do that, does kind of help the audience when they get to hear these things. So thanks for doing that.
No problem. Yeah, it was great. I love doing these, meeting people like you. It's just fun. So yeah, no problem at all.
Perfect. Okay, Justin. Well, say good day. Goodbye. You have a good rest of your day, and we'll catch you. Well, at some point we'll catch up and do a kind of repeat, no doubt.
Yes, for sure. Yep, absolutely.
Perfect. Right, mate. You take care. Enjoy the summer, the June summer that's come early.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I'll get out there. Yeah, I'll enjoy it. All right. Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, cheers, mate. Bye bye.
Have a good one. Bye.